everyone, I'm Shannon. I'm a naturalist from Calvert County Parks in Maryland, and we're here outside the Nature Center at Battle Creek Cypress Swamp where I began working in the late 90s. At that time there were so many monarchs here that there would be a dozen monarch chrysalides just hanging off of the eaves here of the building every August and September. But within the last decade we noticed that there was a huge decline in their population. And it's really rare to actually see a monarch making its chrysalis on the eaves of the building here now. But our story, unfortunately, was not unique. There were similar declines that were happening across the country. So in 2014, I decided it was time to do something about it. And then I started offering monarch conservation programs here for the public and for volunteers. We've also been working on plans to manage our park meadows for pollinators like monarchs, as well as for songbirds. But for this video, we're going to focus on a community science project called the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project, or I may refer to it as MLMP for short. It's sponsored by the Monarch Joint Venture and the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum. I've been surveying the Cypress Swamp Meadow here for monarch larvae since 2018 with the help of volunteers, but you can also participate with this project at home as long as you have milkweed, because it's a wonderful way to help monarchs. And you know, if you have kids or grandkids, or if you're just a kid at heart, being able to watch them grow and make their chrysalis right in your own backyard or front yard is definitely a worthwhile experience. This video is going to give you a snapshot of how to do several of the activities associated with the MLMP project. So come join me in our meadow. If you're doing this at home in your small garden, all you have to do, you know, if it's a small enough site, you can actually count the individual plants. But we have a little over half an acre for our study site here. So that would be an awful lot of plants to count. And you want to do it here in our meadow at the beginning of the season, because after a while, the shrubbery gets so tall, it's difficult to do a straight line transect. So in order to determine the milkweed density, we would have to do random sampling and do transect lines through this meadow. So what we would have done in May, when the shrubs were short, is I would stay here at the end of the meadow where the path is mowed, and we'd pick a random direction to go. And the way you could do that is toss a stick or a pencil up in the air. So if you're trying to do this at home and you have a nice field or meadow where you want to monitor the milkweed, this is probably the method that you would use in order to determine the density of the milkweed in your meadow. So I'm going to toss this stick up in the air and we'll see what direction it travels. So I can either choose to go that way with my transect line or that way. So since I have milkweed here, I'm going to choose to go that direction where the stick fell. And I might hold on to this so I can use it later. So then at that point, what I would do is I would take 5 steps and in that direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I want to put this PVC pipe quadrat. You could use a hula hoop if you don't have a quadrat. This is just 1 meter sections of PVC pipe with the elbows on the end. But whatever you do, you always want to make sure that your quadrat is in the same position each time you lay it down along your transect plot. So I'm going to determine that the left corner will always be touching my right toe. So that way I don't say, ooh, there's a lot of milkweed over here, I'm going to put this over here on that spot. You definitely don't want to mess up your scientific method here. So I'm just going to let it go, and then I'm going to count how many milkweed plants are within this plot. So there are 2 milkweed plants, so then I would record that on my clipboard and one of these points. So I would repeat this 99 more times. So I would continue in this direction until I got to the edge of the meadow. Then I would toss this stick up in the air again to determine the next path I would take through here. So I would go another 5 steps in this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I would make sure that the quadrat is in at the top, my top right toe, the bottom left of the quadrat, and then count the milkweed in there. And it looks like for plot number 2, I would write down 1 milkweed plant. And just repeat, repeat, repeat until you get 100 plots. And then you're going to total up your number of milkweed plants and then divide by 100. So that's why you want to do 100 plots. Plus, the more plots you do, the more accurate your milkweed density is going to be. All right, for the next couple minutes, I'm going to review how to fill out the data sheet 1C. Unfortunately, there's actually snow on the ground outside right now while I'm making this part of the video, so I can't show you any examples of milkweed plants or monarch butterflies. So I'm going to use one of our data sheets from September of 2020 and show you how we filled that out. Now, in the cypress swamp meadow, we monitored 150 plants per week. But we were able to do that because we would have at least 5 people out there monitoring plants. And so each person only had to do about 30 plants. So that was definitely manageable. If you're doing this in a small garden and you only have 20 plants or less, then you want to just monitor every single milkweed plant that you have. All right, so let's go through this. So you want to put the year and then observers. I didn't put it on there because it was just me that did it. Where you did it. I added this at the top because we ended up having 6 different sections. During the pandemic, we made separate sections for social distancing. That way each volunteer had their own section. All right, so then you write down the milkweed species, and then the date and start and stop time and the temperature in the shade. You can also get that online if you don't have a thermometer with you. At the bottom, this is if you have 2 different milkweed species. The only species we had in our meadow was common milkweed, but if you also had swamp milkweed or butterfly weed, you would put the information for those plants down here. Okay. All right. So this is the block you're going to use most often. 0 monarchs per plant. So you just put a tally mark in there for every single plant that does not have a monarch on it. And then moving on in these sections, each one of these blocks represents 1 plant. So on that particular day, we found 1 plant that had an egg and another plant with a 5th instar. And a 3rd plant had an egg and a 3rd instar on it. So let's say you found a plant with 5 5th instars on it. You would write that in this block right here. All right, and then we put our totals down at the bottom. You also want to look around while you're doing this and note any adults that you see. And on that day, we saw one of the monarchs was too far away to see whether or not it had scent pouches. So that one was an unknown. And you also want to note any species that are blooming, including milkweed, that might attract the adult monarchs to your area. And then any disturbances such as mowing or weed eating. And then if you saw the oleander aphid, you'll note that there. And then anything else that you think is noteworthy, such as over half of the plants had aphids on them. Oh my goodness. And cool, we saw a female monarch laying her eggs. And that's it. That's all there is to it. All right, this particular plant has 3 monarch caterpillars on it. One right there, and there, and where is the 3rd one? Oh, right here. Looks like they're all third instars of various sizes because their back tentacles are sticking out. In order to reduce bias in this study, we have to choose our milkweed plants randomly. It doesn't matter how you do it, just make sure you decide before you start. So my random method today will be to examine every other milkweed plant on my left as I walk through the trails. So I will look at this one, and that one. So for activity 4A, characteristics of random milkweed plants, we're going to, before we even touch the plant, is take a look at it. So let's say we're going to look at this milkweed plant right here. First of all, we want to see what kind of insects are on there. So I definitely see a ton of ants crawling on there. These are the Aphis nereid. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. The oleander aphids. Okay, those will need to be noted later on activity 1C. Since there's not a whole lot of space on this data sheet, I'm just going to say ants. And I'm just going to say O aphid, so I know that it's the oleander aphids. Okay, and then we have to measure the plant and look to see if it has any buds, flowers, or seed pods. We're going to look at the condition of the plant, how much of it has been eaten, and count how many milkweeds are within 1 square meter. All of the milkweed that we are looking at in our study is going to be Asclepias syrica, which is the common milkweed. And it looks like this one is about 124 centimeters tall. So we'll put that on our data sheet. We're also going to note if there are any flowers or buds. The flowers on this plant have died, so I'm not going to check that off. I'm just going to check seed pod off, because here's a little teeny tiny seed pod. As far as how much of the plant is yellowed and dying, I don't really see any yellow leaves, so I'd probably give that one a 1, which is less than 5% of it is yellowing or browning. As far as herbivory, there's a couple of chew holes on here. There's one there and one there and a little bit down here, but you know, 3/4 of the plant leaves are not gone at this point. So there is a little bit of herbivory, so I would give this one a category 2, which is less than 5% of the plant has been eaten. As far as measuring how many milkweeds are within 1 square meter, we could grab a big clunky PVC pipe quadrat, which isn't the greatest to carry around in the field with us. So we could just use our measuring tape and give a good estimate. What we can do is put our plant that we're looking at and put our measuring tape right there at the plant and stretch out the tape 1/2 meter, which is right there at my thumb, and then use it kind of like the radius of a circle and go around the entire plant and count how many milkweeds are within 50 centimeters, a 50 centimeter radius of this plant. So in this case, there's 1, 2, 3 more milkweeds besides this one. So I would put a 3 on my data sheet. As you come across a plant that has a monarch caterpillar or egg on it, not only are you going to record it, this is 5th instar, by the way. You can tell because his tentacles in the front are longer than 1 centimeter. So I have already written him or her on data sheet 1C. There was only 1 monarch on this plant, so I wrote a 5 for 5th instar on there. But also on the back of this data sheet, we wanted also record information on data sheet 4A, characteristics of milkweed plants that have monarchs on them. So this plant is 79 centimeters tall. Okay, there are no seed pods on this plant. Oh, there's also a milkweed beetle. We'll have to note that on the data sheet in addition to our 5th instar monarch. As far as the looks or condition of the plant, I would say, you know, here's a couple of yellowed and dying leaves. They aren't all that way, so I would give that a 2. 5 to 40% of the plant is yellowed or dying. And how much of it has been chewed on. There's a hole there, some herbivory there and there. So this one, I would probably say, let's see, there are a couple leaves missing from the bottom too. Maybe we would give this one a 3, which is 5 to 25% of the plant has been eaten. And then as far as the number of milkweeds within a meter, really, it's only that one. There are no other milkweeds around that particular plant.